Sorry about that. Another way we are trying to assist our US companies is providing relevant, up-to-date market data by sharing infographics provided by our in-country contractors. The infographics can be found on these social media platforms that you're seeing here and are updated monthly. It's a great way to get a snapshot of the segments growing within a market, new trends, updates on travel, and more. Again, you can find them on our social media platforms, so don't forget to follow WUSATA. At this time, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Lee Sunghwa, Executive Director of R&L Associates, is WUSATA's in-country representative in Japan. R&L Associates is an organization based in Japan that has been working for numerous United States and Europe food and beverage marketing and promotions for trade and consumers, serving multiple and wonderful foreign clients in addition to WUSATA. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you go ahead and take it away, Lee. Ms. Lee.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you, Christy, for your kind introduction. Good morning from Tokyo, Japan. My name is Lee Sunghwa, Japan in-country representative for WUSATA. First of all, a happy new year. 新年明けましておめでとうございます。今年もどうぞよろしくお願いいたします。Here in my presentation, I would like to quickly talk about Japanese food and beverage market and consumption trends. Japan is officially divided into 8 regions, which can be further subdivided into 47 prefectures. The division is traditional. These enjoy considerable levels of autonomy in the areas of administration and budgetary matters and are represented by prefectural governor elected every 4 years. Today, most of the national retail store chains set up distribution centers and inventory management systems for these regional blocks and the country's food security management systems. 94% of Japanese population occupies urban areas of the country, whereas only 8 million people live in the rural parts of Japan. Conversely, urban population has been expanding. Japanese food and beverage market is significantly import-based, with major imports of pork, beef, soybeans, wheat, cigarettes, veal, chicken, and coffee. That said, although the Japanese market relies on imported products, domestic food producers also try to keep their market share by offering traditional products and attracting consumers. So far, on the international level, Japan has progressed to sign on bilateral, trilateral, and multilateral trade agreements. It means Western U.S. agricultural and seafood industries must compete with more foreign suppliers who have come to offer a variety of food and drink products for the final consumption in Japan. For instance, in the upscale consumer goods categories, American products always fight for more shelf space against European products. In the mainstream market, products from Korea, Southeast Asia, and China, and those in the Southern Hemisphere have gained lots of popularity. This slide is provided by the FAS Japan, showing the current market size and share of the U.S. agricultural and seafood products in Japan. In each category, U.S. products are competing very hard against the other international suppliers. Just before pandemic, Japan became one of the most preferred destinations for the international tourists who looked forward to enjoying delicious, unique, and healthy food and drinks in Japan. From a modern historical and cultural perspective, Japan is often described as 1, the fastest civilization achiever in Eastern Asia, 2, a top-notch fish handling and eating nation in the world, and 3, high literacy owner in general with good command of reading, writing, and calculation, a good basis to share collectively the common knowledge, authorities' guidance and instructions, participation in community, and preservation of cultural legacy. In the past 150 years after civilization, There were numerous encounters with foreign people, food culture, and products Japan absorbed or applied into their Japanese food market and the diet. At those times, the US initiated Japan to open the door to the Western countries. It was triggered first by the US-Japan Treaty of Amity and Commerce, so-called Paris Treaty in 1858. After major Japanese seaports were opened to the treaty powers, numerous foreign experts arrived in Japan to promote Japanese civilization and social modernization. Japanese breweries and distilleries were born in the dawn of the civilization along with the embarkment of Western food culture and foreign experts. Japanese food culture has advanced along with the epoch-making American food products, including Budweiser, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, McDonald's hamburger and French fries, Domino pizzas, Haagen-Dazs ice cream, Starbucks coffee, and more. These great tastes have brought about excitement and joy together to the Japanese consumers over the generations. In the retail market, the traditional Papa Mama shops and local shopping streets disappeared since mid-80s as American-style chain store operation system prevailed the Japanese retail sector. Successful penetration could be made almost only by good partnerships between the US suppliers and the Japanese distributors. Throughout the process of market opening, and development for the US food commodities, USDA has actively supported the industry and their Japanese partners through various programs like MAP, which WUSATA has participated to offer to the US suppliers as in this event. Japanese food distribution channels. Wholesalers have unique role and function, which is more than just delivery men or jobbers. Major food wholesalers are rather financier, distribution coordinator for the grocery items, cold chains, and pacemaker for seamless and efficient delivery on the day-to-day basis to the retail outlets. For alcoholic beverages, there are a couple of powerful distributors in Japan whose network is indispensable not only for the domestic, but also for the foreign product to reach to the consumer level. As said, Japan is not able to fully cover demand for agricultural products with domestic production, so it relies on imports. Meat and meat products constitute more than 20% of total Japan's agri-food imports in terms of value. In recent years, the Central Wholesale Market Law has been revised to respond to the changing global food supply and demand situation. For three perishable categories of the food, about 75% of Japanese consumers source them in supermarkets and GMS store outlets, not online, convenience store, nor drugstores. Deli section and in-store bakery area are also very flourishing, whose sales directly synergize liquor section typically on weekends and in seasonal promotions. Last year, food retailers continued to be the main food station for the consumers. Pandemic didn't change consumers' attitude much regarding what to eat in their daily lives or on special family occasions and seasonal events. What they changed most was the shopping style, where and how to buy their food and drink. These pie charts show the breakdowns of what the Japanese consumers put in their shopping carts in the same months of 2019 and last year. The percentages per category look almost identical. For food consumption, people tend to be conservative by choosing something they have already known well for the daily meals. Last year, the electronic commerce market of consumer goods made a big leap by more than 20% compared with the sales of 2020. Food sales total also grew by 21.1%, while the consumers still prefer to buy manually fresh and perishable food. As you can see, for consumer food, beverages and alcoholic drink products highlighted in blue, e-commerce sales had only 3.3% share, which shows low penetration rate of the electronic commerce. Japanese consumers feel stronger confidence and comfort by purchasing the food and drinks in actual retail store ends rather than in the EC sites. There are a couple of estimated reasons why the EC penetration did not progress in food and drink categories. One is that Japanese consumers wanted to know more about original information of the food and drink in EC site before pushing purchase button. Most of the Japanese consumers wanted to confirm the food quality firsthand by themselves. So at the moment, consumers are quite happy with buying their favorable food and drinks in the convenience stores and supermarkets in about a few minutes walking distance from their home. In 2021, about 1/3 of Japanese consumers bought food and drinks via cashless payment method. Last year, Japan's cashless payment deals reached to 29%. Japanese government is trying to push up the consumers' electronic settlement ratio to 40% by the timing of the 2025 World Expo Osaka in Kansai. Like in the US, in Tokyo metropolitan areas, so-called dark stores and Q-commerce providers have gained good recognitions last year, particularly driving the retail food competitions. Uber Eats grew into a major delivery agent in Japan. In addition to food service menus for home delivery, Uber Eats has established partnerships with the hard drink dealers and retail chains like Aeon Liquor, Kakuyasu, Whiskey, Liquor Mountains, etc. to increase more selections of alcoholic beverage available for home drinkers. Stay-home trends, Japanese consumers' general shopping mode has become similar to the holiday patterns of the before pandemic. Now, people tend to spend more for value-added and gourmet snacks, trying a variety of craft drinks to pair with these specialty food. We see growing opportunities under the with Corona status quo for the US craft drinks to be the choice of Japanese consumers who continue to look for good taste, story, and emotional value behind our products. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Our next speaker I'd like to introduce is Mr. Enrique Mazan. He is the Assistant Director of ATO Tokyo, the American Embassy in Japan. He has worked for the last 5 years with FAS USDA. Take it away, Enrique.
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for spending some time with us today to talk about a really interesting topic in craft beer and spirits. As Christy kindly mentioned, I'm the new Deputy Director for our Agricultural Trade Office here in Tokyo. I also wanted to introduce our local staff, Mr. Mayasuki Otsuka, who also goes by Alex, who covers the craft beer and spirits portfolio. Quickly, Alex, if you're on, if you could say hi, that would be great.
What is the name, Enrique? I'll see if I can allow to talk. Name again?
Yeah, Masayuki Otsuka.
I don't see them. I'm sorry.
He may have typed it in as Alex.
Yes, here we go. Okay, hang on just a moment. Okay, I'm allowing to talk right now.
Great.
Okay, go ahead. You'll just need to unmute.
Well, we'll have time at the end, so I'll just move us along. But I wanted to just highlight that Alex in our office handles this portfolio and will be a great resource to everybody with any questions or inquiries. As I mentioned, here at the ATO and in Japan overall, our footprint, the USDA footprint, is rather large. We have 4 offices, the Agricultural Trade Office in Tokyo, an Agricultural Trade Office in Osaka, the Office of Agricultural Affairs, including the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. And altogether, I think really speaks to the significance and importance of the bilateral relationship that we have with Japan. So with that, let's turn our attention to the topic at hand, which is regulatory considerations for craft beer and spirits. I will now share my screen. And Christy, could you confirm that slide deck is up?
I'm not seeing your screen yet. Okay, we are seeing your screen. There we go.
Great. Wonderful. So let's dive right into the considerations you guys need to have. By way of background, Japan's regulatory laws on liquor changed back in 2017 that really had an impact to both beer and wine. Primarily, the significance was that it would change the rates of beer, and that those changes would be implemented in 3 stages. And so the first rate change occurred in 2020, and then the preceding rate changes would then go into effect in 2023, and then the last one being in 2026. And this change was really in an effort to get the variations of beer and beer-based alcoholic beverages into a unified single tax category. And so the government of Japan also wanted to try to export not just sake, which is a very popular alcoholic beverage that they've had success with, but they wanted to really develop this craft beer segment. And so with consolidating the various beer products, including Hapsho, which is a low malt beer, into a single liquor tax category, they defined that specific beer as a beer flavored effervescent alcoholic beverage, which is really interesting. And that definition would allow expanded use of the various adjunct ingredients that you find in different flavored beers that you may have tried yourselves, such as fruits, spices, herbs, honey, sugar, other products that, in addition to those, allowed ingredients such as malt, grain, starches, and sugar, and specific aromatic ingredients to be part of this new definition that the government of Japan implemented. And so, as I just described, those changes would go into different stages of implementation. our office wrote a really detailed report. Please go to the link if this presentation is shared, that really dives into the details and gives the domestic impacts as well as imported U.S. alcoholic beverages and the costs comparisons of each. And a couple of things from this slide I wanted to just highlight is the tax rates for sparkling low alcohol spirits, as you see on the slide, would also be changed. And it's really about the alcohol, I guess, the content here. So please take a look at that when you get an opportunity to. And then in addition to the tax laws and reforms, the consumption tax rate also changed from 8% to 10%. And so for US exporters, really the higher cost for shipping, distributions, and then the fact that we do see, I get the retail pricing is about 2 to 3 times the price of domestic beer, domestic premium beer, excuse me. And so that's a consideration you guys will have to think about. But certainly, you know, the craft beer market is still fairly small. It represents about 1 to 2%. And so there's definitely opportunity for growth. And I think the fact that American style and American influence is something that has grown and Japanese consumers really favor. And then in addition, so as a result, the liquor tax burden as a percentage of the final price is substantially less than domestic beer. So please keep that in mind. These next slides really go into the definitions that were provided by MHLW, which is the regulatory arm in Japan. And that's something that you'll need to look at closely. If you all can just jot down this website, it's www.usdajapan.org. You can find this this guide under the export guides under the liquor guide, and this will walk you through some of the specific considerations that you'll need to keep in mind. I wanted to talk briefly about kind of the market right now. We're in the 6th wave of COVID-19. And so after 30 months or so, we find ourselves still with online virtual events, which is better than nothing. And you know, pre-COVID, obviously, building relationships with your contacts and the work that we would normally do would really be to facilitate introductions, which we still do. But obviously, the in-person interaction is truly important. And so nothing is really normal, but we've been able to be flexible and pivot. And so we ask that you consider these aspects, and also please leverage our office because it's still a key function of what we do, and not just in Tokyo, but in Osaka. So, and as I introduced Alex earlier, please reach out. So to conclude, you know, we do see some of the changes in tax, you know, as more of a benefit to domestic producers, But I think the wide variety and uniqueness of many of the craft beer brewers in the U.S. Provides and may provide some variety that the Japanese consumers may grow to like, and so we see that as a great strength. And as I mentioned, the craft beer market in Japan is only 1 to 2%, and so there's substantial room for growth. And you know, Japan is heavily dependent on imports, so we feel very confident that the influence and the variety that the U.S. offers is a huge benefit and strength. And once you do make those connections and form strong relationships, you know, there's a very strong loyalty with those relationships. So please keep that in mind. Here's our contact information. Please leverage our office and reach out. We're happy to support and make introductions as we can. So with that, thank you guys very much.
All right, great. Thanks, Enrique. Our last speaker, Mr. Todd Stevens, is the Managing Director of Beer Cats in Tokyo, Japan. After graduating from the University of Washington, he moved to Tokyo in 2009. Before finding Beer Cats in 2013, Todd held numerous positions in the beer and wine industry. So go ahead, Todd.
Hello, everyone. All right, so we don't have too much time, so we'll jump right into it. Okay, so I wanted to expand a little bit upon what Enrique was saying about the tax structure and what it means for the craft beer industry here, and also what challenges and opportunities I see and the changes that have occurred over the past 5 years and especially in the past 2 years. So a brief introduction of our company. Beer Cats is an importer. We import craft beer and from the United States and also Australia. We're in our 9th year of business. We import brands like Wild Barrel from San Diego, Evil Twin Brewing. In the past, we imported Elysian prior to their buyout by AB InBev. So things have changed quite a bit. I should also mention we own 2 craft beer bars, and one that's a retail store as well, one in Okinawa and one in Tokyo. So one of the things that's changed over the past 5 years is this move towards higher end craft beer. So if you had asked me 9 years ago when we started, what our strategy was to get the most volume at the lowest price and get the beer into as many mouths as possible. We wanted to introduce some brands that had not been in Japan yet. And at the time, we had pretty favorable exchange rates, and so our prices were much lower. And we were able to compete in the market because A, there wasn't as much craft beer out there, and the exchange rate and logistics costs were lower. So now where we are 9 years later is there is more competition, both domestically and through other importers. There's more brands available. The exchange rate is not favorable, and logistics costs have gone up dramatically. So we're in this kind of situation here. And I want to highlight what I see as the challenges and opportunities. And so the first one being, we have domestic competition in the high volume sector. There's a product or a machine called Kieran's, produced by Kieran. It's called Tap Marché. So what you see here is the machine. It's a little draft beer server, and it uses 3-liter PET bottles. And it's a proprietary system owned and licensed by Kieran. So not anybody can just produce this. You have to license with Kieran to be able to get into this distribution. And this has been dramatic. There's more than 1,500 outlets using this machine, and it's growing quite a bit. And as you can see, the brands here might be a little small, but you have Spring Valley, which is actually Kirin. It's the original name of the Kirin Brewery when they started in the 1800s. And you have Brooklyn, which is owned 30% by Kirin. And the Yona Yona Yahoo Brewing is also owned 30% by Kirin. And then the others, like Hitachi no Nesbeer and Issei Kadoya, those don't have any ownership relationship, but they are licensed to distribute through this. So what this does is it kind of locks the market in that our imported product or other smaller domestic craft beer producers cannot participate because you need special equipment and the licensing costs are quite high. So what happens is you have this limitation on what can be served in this machine. And so you have bars that are saying, we serve craft beer, and they have a sign that says craft beer. But unfortunately, some of this is not what we would call craft beer in the States because of the ownership and independence terms. So craft beer as a term does not have legal protection here or a meaning the way it does in the States. So I would say it's been co-opted, and this is not a good thing for the industry. So this is a huge competitor to anyone trying to sell volume in the Japanese market. So then what do we do about that? I'll talk a little bit about the opportunities later. I wanted to expand upon some of the costs that Enrique had talked about, the tax as a portion of the beer itself. A lot of those taxes were listed as kiloliters, which I know is not immediately obvious, but so I put everything into what it costs as a portion of a pint of beer. So the sales tax being 10%, the FOB cost from the brewery is about 15% at the bottom here. Logistics, that includes domestic and the international logistics, comes to about 6%. And then the alcohol tax is about 9%. So importers take their margin, and then the restaurants have to take a certain margin to be able to remain in business. So what you end up with is a pint of most imported craft beer would be between 1,100 and 1,300 yen, which is about $10 to $12 a pint. That's a typical price. And this comes through, as Enrique mentioned, that in a retail product, it's also 3 times the standard price that you would see in the States at least, and are 3 times the price of a domestically produced regular beer. For example, an Asahi or a Sapporo would be $2 on the shelf. Craft beer would be $6 to $7 on the shelf. Okay. So we talked a little bit about that tax revision schedule, and this is important. This is a good thing for everybody, I believe, because it is fair in that it's volume based and it has does not change whether it's imported or domestically produced. So this first tax change that happened in October of 2020, we went down from 220 yen per liter to 200 yen per liter. And in 2023, we're going to have that go to 181, and then by 2026, it'll be 155. What I want you to notice in the bottom of this, we mentioned Happoshu. So what is that? Happoshu as a product, it's obviously inferior to beer because it's lower malt. So under 50% malt, it's a beer-like beverage. Happoshu's entire existence historically is because of this tax structure. 220 yen per liter is quite expensive when you're making high volume and you have, you want lower prices. So the entire category was created as a response to the high taxes of beer. And what happened was Happoshu started taking over a greater portion of the market. This isn't really good for consumers. You have a lower priced product, but it's inferior. And the Japanese government was actually missing out on the tax revenue for beer. So in their minds, over the long term, if we could make the tax the same for both products, Happoshu will eventually go away because there's no reason to sell a product that is inferior for the same tax price. So this should be good for consumers. This should mean an increase in quality and an increase in beer consumption over happoshu or beer-like beverages. So I talked about that tax structure, and Enrique mentioned the tax structure for various different products. And so I've divided the tax, I would say the categories of budget and premium, and then for each product, so let's say beer and wine, sake, shochu, spirits, and how, if this is a budget item, meaning, you know, something that would be in a grocery store, what percentage of the tax of the total price is there? And this is represented by this diagram here. As you can see, when you have a premium product, the tax, because it's by volume, not by the price, is at least the alcohol tax, is a lower portion of the finished product. So this is where I see the opportunity, in that you can't compete on volume because you have domestic producers doing so. And because the tax is such a high portion of it, you have to sell a huge amount to make it worthwhile. Whereas with a premium product, the tax becomes less relevant and you can compete domestically, because a lot of these, even though there are breweries here, smaller mid-sized breweries making American styles, like let's say the trend being hazy IPAs or New England style IPAs, even though these are being produced domestically, it's still seen that imported products are superior to those and they're desired in the market. So certain styles that America does very well with can command a higher price. And I see the biggest opportunity with things like that. So the other thing that's happening is that the domestic producers and the smaller ones and importers are all moving towards a B2C model, whether that's opening their own bars or retail stores, as we've done. Many importers have done so as well, and or selling e-commerce, having their own websites. In our case, we've developed an app that's similar to Tavour in the States. It's a app that's used to purchase beer. So we have made these moves because, especially in this COVID era, we can't depend on draft sales anymore in craft beer bars, because a lot of restaurants have been shut down or had there's restrictions on how late you can serve alcohol right now, for example. And so our draft sales have gone down dramatically. Going a little bit back to historically, 7 or 8 years ago, draft sales were about 80% of our total sales, and now and package would have been 20 to 30%. Now we're flipped completely over, and draft sales are 20 to 30%, and package is 70%. What I think this trend is going to continue. Draft sales will come back eventually, but more domestic producers are getting the taps because of the freshness, and we have opportunity then in smaller quantities but higher priced beer. The overall average retail price of beer has gone up dramatically. I know many of you who are producers probably see your costs going up, and so you have to charge more. So in general, everything has gone up in price. And fortunately, the consumers here are highly educated, highly knowledgeable about craft beer. So they're okay with paying this price if they know the quality is there. So that's what I see is the chance. And this works for spirits as well. In anything that you produce, if it's of high quality, it can command a high price. And that comes down to the marketing and the brand recognition. So I think that's about it. We'll have a brief Q&A. So thank you so much for listening, and please drop your questions if you have any in the chat.
All right, thank you, Todd. Thank you to all our speakers. Wonderful job. Please feel free at this time, our attendees, please feel free to drop a question in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll get your questions answered. Give people a couple minutes to think of some stuff.
Well, Christy, if I can ask the group a question, maybe that'll get the engines turning here.
Sure.
How many are looking at Japan or are doing business currently in Japan?
Do we have any attendees that are interested in that, looking at doing business in Japan? Oh, I have one hand up. Two. I'll give it a minute. We don't have to count as they're raising their hands. So it looks like we have three.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, please take a look at the USDAJapan.org website. There's a lot of great resources and information there. And if there's anything specific that you want to discuss, please send us an email. And I think our email was up previously, but please do so.
Great. And I will also be sending out a follow-up email to our attendees and to those who could not attend that will have the link to this presentation. And I will also include that website. Enrique, you said USDAJapan.org, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I have one question here in the chat.
Yeah.
And it's about how many local craft breweries are in business. So we have about 200 to 250 craft breweries here in Japan. Some that are very, very small, microbreweries, so under a barrel size production. And then there's probably about 10 craft breweries that are you would consider to be medium to large, in the brew house range of 20 to 50 barrels. But the majority fall under 10 barrel brew house size, so very small. And I'm sorry, what is a CAGR? Compound annual growth rate. This is tough because I can't quite answer that. All I can say is that, especially for the market on the total, as Enrique mentioned, craft beer is coming close to 2%. And when we started, it was far under 1%. So we've, over the past 10 years, I would say the craft beer market itself has probably at least multiplied by 5 to 8 times total size for craft beer in Japan.
Great.
And the question about importers of craft beer using cold chain from the US to Japan, we do. I would say that 80% of craft beer importers are using cold chain or a hybrid. We certainly do 100% from end to end. We refrigerate here and we send it to our customers via refrigerated shipping. This is dramatically more expensive than doing dry. But we believe it's important from a quality perspective. Some importers do not do cold chain and for cost reasons, but I think the end user has become educated enough that they demand it and they recognize that it's not very good. Sorry, one more question here, and it's other alcoholic categories of good growth opportunities like cider, seltzer. This is a challenge. Cider is growing, the market's growing, but it's a bit tough. It doesn't have, there's not a gluten-free market here the way there is in the States. So cider's been a bit tough, but it is growing. In regards to seltzer and RTDs, this is actually an area where Japan already has that kind of locked down. We have a thing called a chuhai, which is a liquor beverage that has extremely favorable tax circumstances. So they're like $1, $1.50 on the shelf, and they're very, very good. People like them a lot. So if you import a seltzer that's going to compete with this product, the seltzer is going to come in at $4, competing against a Japanese product that's $1.50, that is in many ways more superior. So RTDs, I think that domestic production is going to just trump that. There's only one category I think that could be an opportunity for RTDs, and that's a high-end cocktail in a can. I think something using you know, a very high-end liquor, something with brand recognition, could be potentially successful here. But I don't see it for seltzer at all. I don't see opportunity. And then, sorry, one more thing.
Todd, can I stop you for just a moment?
Yeah.
Did you see what are your expectations for business travel quarantine requirements in the coming year?
I guess I could
I'll
punt that to Enrique. Yeah.
I'll just speak to some of the restrictions briefly. You know, we're in, as I mentioned in my presentation, we're in our 6th wave here in Japan, and we, the government of Japan just issued a quasi-government state of emergency. So there's new restrictions imposed on dining establishments and restaurants, and so we'll have to see. Travel to Japan does require a quarantine, and I believe with all of the prescribed necessary testing, negative tests, you still have a 10-day quarantine. So it's still not ideal. Looking at our upcoming trade shows, supermarket trade show and FoodX, those will be largely subdued, likely what we saw last year. And so we'll have to see once we get to the end of this wave, which all the data shows it's from peak to the end, it's about a 6-week ordeal. So we'll see and have to evaluate. The government of Japan ultimately will look at how the statistics of infections are. But we're cautiously optimistic that I think as we move into mid-spring, kind of getting into summer, perhaps we'll have a better situation. But right now we're just kind of in a holding pattern in these quasi state of emergency restrictions.
I see 2 more questions at the end here. One from Jesse. When do you think that on-trade beer sales will rebound? Back in last year when the restrictions were lifted and our case numbers were very low, so October, November, and December, we saw a huge bounce in on-trade sales, and restaurants were doing very well. We were actually caught in a bit of a, not just us, I'm speaking as importers in general, due to the logistics challenges and forecasting. We didn't have enough keg inventory available, so we couldn't forecast when this thing was going to end. And so what happened was that we could have sold a ton more kegs than we did because the bars reopened and wanted them. And so the demand was certainly there. And domestic producers of craft beer ended up doing very well, I believe, in the tail end of last year. So going forward now, with this holding pattern that we're in, as Enrique said, I think spring, March, April, things will open up again, and we'll see that bounce back again for on-trade. And just finally, one last thing on that is that some of the habits have changed permanently or semi-permanently, and I think there will be more in at-home consumption as people have gotten used to that. More people have gotten used to working from home at least part of the week, and that may continue for a long time, which means that the restaurants and bars that are in the middle of the city will have a harder time than the ones that are in neighborhoods where people live. And so that's a permanent change, I believe. I'm sorry, one more question here we have is focus on premium categories, and then what major factor attracts beer fans? It's not a style thing so much as it is the marketing. We've seen very flashy labels do very well. As you've all seen, I think the trends, the classic looking styles or classic looking labels, not performing very well, but something with a huge marketing power. Oftentimes very silly names and kind of colorful labels, things like that. And anything that has high ratings on Untapped or products or other rating sites tend to do very well. Kind of the hype beers, those items do well. The only caution is that it's a one-time thing. So you might sell it once, and the next time you import it should be something, it could be a completely different product, but you can't expect to sell the same item over and over again. So I think this mirrors what's happening in the States with this kind of hype beer, and you release it and it goes out the door and then you make a new one. And it's not my favorite thing personally, but that's the direction the market is moving in.
Okay, great. Do we have any more questions? Give you about 1 more minute.
So Todd-san, sorry, my question. So Corona beer, from Mexico, I heard it's number one. Selling beer, imported beer in Japan. Ironically, the name Corona really, attracted more people. Just, is it the number one top selling beer for a long time in Japan, or is just a kind of perception? And
I
what do
don't
you think
know.
it's so
It might
popular?
have been number one by volume at one point, but a lot of the Japanese clubs and bars, not like an izakaya, but like a club type place, it was always popular. And I'm sure that in the past 2 years that has gone down dramatically. I don't have the sales figures, but they also had a bit of a change in their domestic distribution 2 to 3 years ago. And Anheuser-Busch InBev kind of took it over for distribution. And I don't know, because of Corona or COVID, I don't know if that it's not related, but the sales certainly dropped.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I'm going to say thank you. We're done just a little bit early. Again, I will be sending a lot of stuff out to you guys so you can have a copy of the presentation and get that website for the USDA and all that good stuff. So thank you to our speakers. Awesome job, and we'll see everybody later.
Thank you very much for coming to the webinar.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.